Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new Survivor off-season podcast series here on Rob Has a Podcast. Yes, the holiday season might be half a year away, but right now we are making a wish list. It's the Survivor 50 wish list to be specific, an off-season series where we are determining who could and should be on the upcoming anniversary season of Survivor 50. My name is Mike Bloom, the conductor of this absolute manic train of an idea that will be barreling through your podcast feeds nearly every weekday for the next 9 weeks, taking us through the beginning of August. I'm so excited. We're going to talk a bit more about what this idea entails and what it's all going to lead to in a little bit. But of course, I need to welcome my guest in here because today we are talking about the first season of Survivor, Survivor Borneo. And I can think of no better person to start this entire process with than arguably the Survivor Borneo of Survivor podcasters out there, the great Rob Cesternino.
Mike, how exciting is this to be talking about Survivor Borneo on today, the 24th anniversary of the premiere of Survivor Borneo?
Yes, this podcast is being released on May 31st, 2024, a mere 24 years after
Yes.
we were introduced to this rowdy, in particular, Rowdy Rudy group of 16
Yes.
strangers stranded on an island in Pulau Tiga, and their lives were changed forever. Do you remember, Rob, when Survivor Borneo went by Survivor Pulau Tiga?
I remember it's, I don't think I ever knew how to spell Pulatiga, but yeah, I remember they used to throw that phrase around when I was reading like the Survivor book following the season.
Yeah, exactly. People are complaining about, like, there are no themes anymore, no subtitles. Back in our day, Survivor went by 3 names in its first season. First, it was just Survivor, then Pulau Tiga, and now Borneo as we know it.
Yeah, I think that they were trying to make Pulatiga a thing because they were just like, there's going to be more. There's going to be more survivors. This is just the first one. It's just right here. But I'm so excited to talk about these 16 people and their prospects for potentially having any of them return for Survivor 50. It's such an exciting, historic season of television to talk about. If you're listening to the podcast version of this to commemorate it, Mike Bloom is fully nude doing this podcast.
It's my birthday somewhere, as I like to say. I just ate a can of dog food. I had a monitor lizard kill a couple chickens down the street to get in the Borneo spirit.
We're eating some rat tonight.
Yeah, it's on like the break of dawn. At least this podcast series is. So, yeah, let's describe what exactly this experiment is going to be. Because, look, when Jeff Probst officially announced that Survivor 50 will be all returnees, the internet broke wide open. And Survivor fans do what they do best. They were a titter and an X, if you will, with cast lists, with speculation as to, okay, will it be old school versus new school? Will it be second chances? Will it be all new era? And so we want to strike while the iron is hot.
As Rudy once said, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So season 50 is filming, of course, next year. So we want to use this off season to kind of prep for what a Survivor 50 might look like. And of course, we knew what was going to be on the menu would be some sort of fan vote. We wanted, much like Cambodia back in the day, it's unlikely, I would imagine, that we'll get a similar case for Survivor 50. We wanted to simulate our own version of if the RHAP listeners had a say as to who would get cast on Survivor 50. We want them to exercise that. But the question is, how do we do it in our own unique way? And how do we winnow down from a number of hundreds of contestants down to probably still more than 100, but a significantly shorter 100? And so we came up with this pretty wackadoo idea where every weekday, this Survivor 50 wishlist series will be myself and one other person, a member of the RHAP community, perhaps a past player. We are going to be talking about a specific season of Survivor on that day through the lens of breaking down the cast by who could and should be on the list to come back for Survivor 50. This can run the gamut of legends that have been on multiple times, near several, in fact, to people who were on one time that we want to see again, pre-merge, Rob Boots, Fallen Angels, etc. It is all a big bucket. At the end of each podcast, we are going to come up with a list of 1 to 3 candidates that will then be submitted into this big fan vote at the end. So after we go through all 46 seasons, we'll have a big fan vote with everyone that was chosen throughout all of these podcasts. And then from there, we should determine this fan voted group of probably 20 people that would be on this fictional Survivor 50.
And while we know Survivor 50 is probably not a fan vote, we think that there's enough excitement out there that there's going to be a lot of votes. They'll probably look at this, right?
Well, Jeff explicitly said that night when he revealed the news about 50 that he's like, yeah, I'm looking at fan lists. I'm not sure. That's a very generic term. I'm not sure who he's following, what boards he's peeping at. So let's try to get some eyes on this, you know? Let's try
But
to
if we make the best list, they'll look at it, right?
I think so. And so that's our job. I say collectively because, again, we're going to be bringing on, I think at this point, a different guest to talk about every single season. And so we are starting today with Survivor Borneo. And this is going to be a very interesting exercise, Rob, for a number of reasons with this cast.
And let me just add to a different person every new player cast. I'm going to pop back in with Mike for all of the returnee seasons where everybody has already been discussed, just to check in on where we're at, talk a little bit about like what the makeup of those casts look like, and potentially any other like if late cases for people that are in the returnee cast that did not make the list so far. So Mike and I will check back in every so often where they did an all returnee season.
Right, so that's going to be obviously All-Stars, Heroes versus Villains, Cambodia, Game Changers, Winners at War. We will all be doing podcasts on those.
You say Heroes versus Villains?
Heroes versus Villains, yeah, right after All-Stars. Because, I think Rob and I are also going to try to do the impossible and, like, decrypt, is there a way that Survivor casts its returning seasons in terms of the number of seasons it pulls between certain archetypes that get brought on, and maybe we can try to figure out a bit of the mystery behind that. But, yeah, otherwise, we'll be talking about every season that involves a new player. So even seasons like Micronesia, Karamoan, Blood versus Water that are half and half. Not only will we be talking about those seasons and pulling people from it, but everyone is eligible from that season. So, hey, if you are a multi-time player and you don't get it on your first season, depending on what seasons you played on subsequently, there's a chance you could get on again.
Okay.
So we are going to be presenting these every weekday. Now, of course, we are a bank of podcasts here on RHAP. So much like a bank, we will be taking off weekends and holidays. But usually,
can we run with that slogan, the bank of podcasts?
Is it too late to do a rebrand again, Rob?
Sure.
So, of course, you could check this out, and your podcast feed will be dropping every weekday. Again,
we'll deposit a podcast in your feed.
Yes, every weekday at 6 a.m. Eastern. And then, of course, here on YouTube, you can check out the video versions of these podcasts dropping at 10 a.m. Eastern. Do not miss a second of what we have going on. You go to robhasawebsite.com/survivor feed. That's where all these podcasts are going to appear in. And also robhasawebsite.com/YouTube to subscribe to this and check out also all the other great Survivor coverage that we'll get into and just don't have time to talk about today. Because the other thing, Rob, is that, listen, it's Survivor 50. We have a lot of these to do. I am going to try to do the impossible for a Mike Bloom podcast and give this a time crunch. We are capping this podcast at 50 minutes apiece, each one.
Okay. Yeah. I think we can do it. Let's not worry too much about it.
Yeah, let's not tarry any further then. Enough setup here. Let's get into the meat, the rat meat, if you will. Let's talk about Survivor Borneo. I mean, one of obviously the most unique seasons out there in the way it was produced, and also in its cast, given the fact that they became genuine A-listers.
Yeah, I've talked about this for so long. They were like the Beatles of reality TV. If people don't know who the Beatles are, I
believe he was a user that talked on Survivor Sucks to Jeff Probst. Is that right?
Yeah. They were the Taylor Swift of reality TV.
Okay, so we should have had, were you like Charlie, where you came in and you're like, God, I can go up against you with Rudy Bosch quotes.
Right. I stand all of these people that they were all heroes. Everyone was just, in my eyes, just, oh my God, these are figures. I never in my life imagined that I would meet many of them. I would play Survivor one day with some of them. And so it's just, incredible that this is not just reality TV history. This is TV history we're talking about. Unfortunately, if I may say one negative thing about the pandemic,
please.
It threw the Survivor schedule off for a year, where that we could have potentially been in this, having this anniversary season where we were celebrating 25 years of Survivor along with the 50th season of the show. Oddly, we will celebrate the 25th anniversary of Survivor 1 year from today, when I don't think that Survivor 50 will have begun filming yet. And so that we will really be like in the trenches of like, did you hear this person's going? Did you hear this person's going? And then they will go out and film it during the 25th anniversary, but it will be pretty darn close to the 26th anniversary of Survivor when Survivor 50 is airing.
I mean, it's a little adjacent to what happened in Cambodia, right? Where I do believe they started filming on the day, the 15th anniversary of the Borneo premiere, and obviously didn't air to that fall. So it'll be a little pushback as well. But listen, if Jeff is indeed listening, if you can make it work to start season 50 on May 31st, 2025, those of us in 2026 won't understand it, but those that are on the beach certainly will.
Yeah, be pretty incredible. Okay.
All right, so let's get into this. I will also bring up front, because this will become very pertinent when it comes to Survivor Borneo in particular. Look, this is a wish list, but we are following some genie logic in that we will not be bringing back contestants from the dead. Those that unfortunately have left us in the Survivor community since their season has filmed will not be up for the vote. Everyone else will.
But in true Fallen Comrades style rites of passage, we're going to go through every cast member of every season and, where appropriate, give our thoughts just on their legacy with Survivor.
All right, well, let us start right now. We're going to work our way through these podcasts in groups. And the first group we'll speak about is from the top down. We're going to start with talking about the returning prospects of the top two finishers of Survivor Borneo, the Snake and the Rat. It is Richard Hatch and Kelly Wigglesworth. Both have come back for a second season. One was bamboozled. One bamboozled us by doing that weird Mana show with Joe Anglam. Here they are. So, again, those that have followed the history of Survivor behind the scenes, Rob, may know that we'll talk about the returning prospects of Richard Hatch. Certainly not the first time we have over the past 20 plus years.
Sure. The prospect of Richard Hatch returning to Survivor, I think, has really captured people's imagination over the years. Of course, he was back with us in Survivor All-Stars, but then after Survivor All-Stars, there was certainly the incident with Sue Hawk, which I think only aged more poorly over time. I think that at the time that it happened, I don't believe that it was a deal breaker in terms of Richard Hatch returning back to Survivor. But shortly thereafter, that Richard Hatch faced trial for income tax evasion. I think that was around 2006. Richard Hatch went to jail. He got out of jail. And then Richard Hatch kind of was back in the Survivor fold a little bit in 2010. Around the time of Survivor Heroes versus Villains. And I do think that there was some consideration for Richard to return to Survivor in 2009 when they filmed Survivor Heroes versus Villains.
Yeah, not only that, I believe there's pretty explicit confirmation that casting had, obviously with the Heroes versus Villains theme, wanted to bring back not only the original winner, but one of the biggest villains, maybe in retrospect, not so much, but certainly of the show. But I believe that a judge denied the request from production because he was still under indictment. And I believe actually the same thing happened, but 2 seasons later, where I believe Redemption Island was originally intended to be a Richard versus Russell season, that the two of them have certainly riled each other up on social media. Russell declaring himself not only the best to do it since Richard Hatch, but even better than Richard Hatch. Richard did not respond in kind. Once again, the judge denied that request as well. To your point, Richard apparently was very heavily in the discussion for Survivor winners at War. But according to Jeff Probst himself, I believe, told an outlet out there on set that due to the nature of the Sue Hawk incident, and especially in the wake of what had just happened on Island of the Idols, they had decided that the climate was not right. And suffice it to say, Richard was not particularly happy with the suddenness of that. And we were not necessarily, I would say, like casting with, okay, how do they feel about the show now? But it
Mhm.
is important to note that he has kind of like sworn off being on Survivor
Yeah.
since then.
And Richard Hatch has made a lot of negative comments about Jeff, about the production, and has spoken ill about every aspect of Survivor to the point where I kind of think that Richard would not get cast for US Survivor. While it would be, in a perfect world where we did not have, any other baggage associated with this. How cool would it be for the winner of the very first season to participate in Survivor 50? But I don't think that is the multiverse that we live in that could possibly happen. And I think Richard Hatch may well play Survivor in the next year, but I think that he will be doing it against a team of Australian Survivor opponents.
Yes, completely agree. Of course, Rob, you and I spoke with Shannon Gus about this on a Patreon pod a couple weeks ago with the news of a possible rumored season of Australian Survivor, it being AU versus US. We'll talk about this and maybe some other players that are not necessarily on the best side of Survivor production. That might be a great way to get someone in to play Survivor again. But also something to know, Richard has been making himself quite busy with reality television, if not Survivor, considering the fact that he will be on the upcoming season of House of Villains that I believe is going to air this fall on E!
Yes. So Richard Hatch will be back playing reality TV. Richard Hatch, just to do some quick math, was 38 years old at the time of the original Survivor season. So 24 years later, that makes him 62. So he definitely could still do it. And
Which I think it was like the age of Sonia when she played the first time.
Sonia's 63. So, there's that, those two are always bookends. And so that would be interesting, if he does play Survivor again at this age. But I don't think that we could have him on the list.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be so nice. And look, again, I am trying to remove any sort of like reality from this. I certainly want to incorporate some realistic stuff in there. I don't know if necessarily age would be a factor because spoiler alert for a lot of these old school seasons, we're gonna have some oldlings on our fan vote here. But I feel like given everything that happened outside of the show, there's too much working against Richard here. And I think he has also kind of presented himself, at least in my head, as like he can do other shows. Now, it'd be nice to see him play Survivor, but at this point, I think we've kind of unfortunately passed him by that I wouldn't necessarily need to see him in the running for 50.
Yeah. And I know, Mike, we're going to get a lot of feedback all the way through on this from people who say that we got it wrong. But I think that we're trying to earnestly do our best to sort of, there's two keys that need to turn, that the player has to want to come back and production has to want them. And I think in the case of Richard, I think he would definitely want to come back. And I think that in the case of production, I don't think that they want, and maybe there's like CBS, Mark Burnett, maybe there could be other stakeholders that say, no, you have to have this person. And that if Richard Hatch gets there, I do believe that is what happened, where that there is some executive or other stakeholder who said, no, we need Richard Hatch. But I don't believe that they're going to put that kind of pressure on the show to have him come back at this particular point in time. So I think that Richard is not going to be considered very seriously for this.
And look, maybe there's another category we might attribute to him. More about that later. Anything about Kelly? Kelly Wigglesworth, super excited to see her come back for second chances. Of course, nearly the first winner of Survivor. Came back and certainly was on Survivor Cambodia. I personally don't think there's anything else we need to see of her, especially, again, after that aforementioned Mana footage came out.
Yeah, the Kelly Wigglesworth return was a disappointment. And, from everything I understand, for the people that were out there with her, she seems like a really nice person. Neat lady. She didn't come here to make friends. She was ill-suited to potentially be the avatar for the first winner of Survivor. I think that the reality TV genre has gotten even further away from the type of person that Kelly Wigglesworth is. She is a reality TV pioneer, but we got her to come back. How many years ago is Second Chances now?
Almost 10 years ago. It was 2015.
10 years ago. And, it didn't thrill us. And so I think that we should leave her as we would the vultures and let nature take its course.
I will also say, by the way,
I would give her as much water as she wanted to drink or raft on.
Oh, thank you, Mad Dog. Yeah, I will also say something that also kind of gets screwed up with the pandemic is that my trick for remembering what Survivor seasons aired in what year was very simple for the first 40 seasons. You just take the number, divide by 2, and round out if it's an odd number, and that's the year it aired in. And that will not be the case moving forward with the new era. But yes, let us raft away from Kelly in this moment. Let's talk about the 7 people that made up the very first jury in Survivor. And I think this is where, Rob, our conversation is going to get really interesting because we have, of course, in order of, I guess, reverse order of elimination, we have the late, great Rudy Bosch, Sue Hawk, Sean Caniff, Colleen Haskell, the survivor of the Pagonging, first ever, Jervis Never Nervous, Jenna Lewis, and Greg Buis. And look, Rob, I try not to come into these podcasts with like, this is my opinion and nobody will change it. But one reason why I was really excited about a concept like this and with a season like this is that could this be a way we get Sue Hawk in on a fan vote?
I don't believe Sue Hawk has any interest in ever returning to Survivor. I love Sue Hawk.
One of your former
cherish the time that I got to spend with her in Survivor All Stars. I really do. I was tickled just being around Sue Hawk for 12 days. That's one of the things I really love about that whole experience. And so I loved getting to spend that time with Sue. I just found her to be just an incredible person. I loved watching her on TV. I don't think she wants anything to do with Survivor. I think that even in and without getting too into things that I know that T-Bird has been trying to get a hold of Sue Hawk for some time. T-Bird had made contact with Sue, who asked to respectfully, like, I am not interested in anything Survivor at this time. I don't know if there is an amount of money that they could throw at Sue Hawk potentially, but I just don't see this as a viable possibility that Sue Hawk is going to be back for Survivor 50.
Yeah, I mean, this would be the wish to end all wishes, in my opinion. I mean, look, it got my ears percolating again when we saw her in the Survivor 46 after show when she made an appearance. It would be absolutely incredible to have someone who delivered maybe the most iconic moment in the show's history to 50 plus million people. And that's the other thing as well. We were talking about this on the B&B recently. Like, people nowadays are complaining about bitter jurors and the way that jurors hijack final tribal council. Like, just look back to what Sue Hawk did in August of 2000 as a reminder that this has kind of been always part of Survivor's lifeblood. I mean, I think part of it as well is the fact that, to your point, I think Sue went out in just a really bad way. Obviously,
kids wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me.
I mean, honestly, it felt like an asylum at certain points, but Sue was such an integral part of this first season. People might not remember, but she actually was part of the very first alliance in Survivor history, where it was short-lived, but the Tagi women were working together for a hot second. And then Sue kind of ditched that when she voted Sona at the first tribal council. But Sue is, I think, a bit of an underrated player as well. She was certainly someone that was maybe wheeling and dealing more, truck wheeling and dealing, if you will, than people may have realized, and obviously contributed to one of the biggest betrayals in the first few seasons when Kelly does turn on her at the final 4 after they have this big fallout at the final 5, final 6. And so it was a no-brainer to bring her back for All Stars. I would love to consider her for this list, but to your point, if we're going off of from a reasonable perspective, who would want to actually come back? I wish in my heart of hearts it would be the case, but I could see why this wouldn't be a possibility.
Yeah, just one of my favorite Suhawk moments, and this wasn't even one that happened. This was me as a viewer. That there was a week of that the survivor. This is how big the Survivor contestants were. They were hosting with Regis.
Yes.
That Kathy Lee had left, and Regis was testing out new co-hosts before he landed on Kelly Ripa, and that there was a day I vividly remember this. Sue Hawk was hosting live with Regis, along with Regis, and then the Republican candidate for president, George W. Bush, was on the show, and Sue Hawk was interviewing George W. Bush.
Doesn't that feel like a fever dream? Like, yes, our political
Yes.
system now kind of feels like fan fiction, but like we had the 4th place contestant from Survivor interviewing the soon-to-be president of the United States.
Oh, yeah, but what are you going to do about all the beaver poop?
Well, Sue, I'll tell you what I'll do. I got a strategy of how to get rid of all tapioca.
It's Sue Hawk. Can you believe it?
There we go. Impression roundup. I don't know if we'll get this on any other podcast, Rob. This is the je ne sais quoi that you bring.
I don't know.
I do want to touch upon a couple of other highlights here, and then maybe we could sort of like blanket discuss some of the other people. Because let's talk about someone else that has kind of skirted the spotlight of Survivor in a very different way. Let's talk about the white whale that is Colleen Haskell, shall we?
Haskell. Yeah, I mean, let's not call her a whale. Okay, we have no idea.
She wasn't the animal, which is a whale.
That's true. Yeah, Colleen, as I like to call her. Wow, what a return this would be. It would be. They should make like true crime podcast about like what happened to Colleen, or leave her alone also and get a job. Okay.
So, yeah, for those that don't know, so Colleen was the sweetheart of Survivor Borneo. Young, a little bit snarky. Complained about how this is basically a game show to the people in the camera as they were filming this entire thing. Got like catapulted into mega stardom. I know that starring in a Rob Schneider movie in 2024 has a lot less weight than it did in 2001, but that's what Colleen did. She appeared on a couple of other things as well, kind of tried to break into Hollywood, but for the most part, especially around the time, Rob, that you went out for All Stars, she slipped under the radar. Danny Boatwright thought she beat the radar, but I think the winner is Colleen from a pure, visual perspective, and she just has kind of gone off to live her life for the time being.
Yeah, she and Greg, and I'm sure we'll get to him in a minute. They were part of this experience. I don't think they liked it.
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I think Colleen certainly expressed in the moment that she was maybe having some misgivings as to this particular part of things.
And to this, I say to you, Colleen, if you didn't like it then, you're really going to hate it now.
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you
thought it was annoying in 2000,
imagine that a boat shows up at her camp and she's like, "Yeah, I'll go on a journey, please." Yeah. Is this like when me and Sean went to go decide the Ratana tribe? Great.
Yeah, and she became this superstar, and yeah, I don't know exactly what was the part of it that she really found distasteful or just did not get along with her. I remember she wanted to work more. I think more behind the scenes was really what it was. And so she has, I believe anecdotally, I know she was working on a like behind the scenes on a talk show at one point. And I think that she has continued to work in media a little bit, but has had a really low profile. Again, it would be a coup and a good one. If they could get her back for Survivor 50, but I just cannot see where. I'm sure Colleen has had, if anybody has her contact information, I'm sure they've contacted her for every returning season, and she has not expressed the interest or desire to return. I cannot imagine why, unless she has like a child who is like the world's biggest Survivor fan and says, "Mom, my dream is to see you play one day." Like, I can't imagine why she would have this about face and want to come back.
Or could it be a Liz Wilcox situation where her daughter says, "I dare you to go on the show"?
I dare you.
Yeah, because Colleen does have 2 children. She, I don't think, has any social media, so it's been a lot of anecdotal evidence, but listen, we'll maybe talk about down the line. Maybe we could throw some pipe dreams in here. Let's talk about, you mentioned...
I've never met Colleen, one of the few people that I could say...
You didn't go to the 10th anniversary party?
Nope. I've never met her. Like, there's probably like it's a small list at this point that I've never had any engagement interaction with. But Colleen is top of the list.
Well, let's talk about her speculated island cuddle buddy in the form of Mr. Greg Buis. Greg, one of the most enigmatic Survivor characters in history, in
Yep.
my opinion. This is a guy who was incredibly brainy, Ivy League educated, but honestly, Rob, like, stop me if you feel like I'm minimizing this, was basically a giant troll in Survivor Borneo. He played up a lot of stuff like he didn't care. It was a lot of
Mhm.
jokes. He was the one that apparently allegedly led this coup against Jeff Probst in the first Pagong vote, where they all tried to vote him out. Like, he was this interesting balance of someone that was clearly trying to play up, like, no, I don't really care, but he did actually care at the same time.
Yeah, the mythology around Greg is so interesting that he's always painted like anecdotally as, oh, he was a genius. He was the smartest one. He was the best outdoorsman, but he didn't take this seriously. He didn't really buy in to the mythology of Survivor. He was goofing off. He didn't apply himself. He could have won if he wanted to. And Greg, I think that part of this mystery is just we just don't know that much about him.
Yes. Now, what is interesting
Yes.
is you asked before, did they like their experience? For what it's worth, during Survivor Second Chance, Jeff Probst was asked who were some people that you wished were in the running that you couldn't get, and Jeff Probst named Greg. Greg
Yeah.
was in the running for second chances. He had to bow out due to work commitments. I think he had just been made like CEO or CFO of a nonprofit. So this might be the drum that I personally beat because I do think that Greg is somebody that would be interested in coming back. And look, maybe it would be even more of a shit show, especially now that the game has become so incredibly meta and full of advantages. Greg might just say F it and like again pull an aforementioned Liz and not look for idols and everything. But if we get a chance to crack the mystery of Greg in a new era season, I can't help but grab at that brass ring.
It would be so wild to have Greg appear in Survivor 50. I mean, what would the coconut phone even look like? Can he find like a flat coconut?
Yeah, coconut iPhone. Well, Shane got the BlackBerry, right? So we have to find like the Pokemon evolution of it. Would it be like a coconut smartwatch, maybe? Coconut AI, coconut VR headset?
Yeah, maybe some sort of vision headset that he could put on to connect with the world. I mean, I would love to see it. I really would. I'm not opposed to putting him on the list, but I do think it's probably rather unlikely that he would want to come back for an anniversary such as this.
Well, let me add another name here. How about the woman sitting right next to him
Yeah.
in Jenna Lewis? Of course, Jenna did return for a second time in Survivor All Stars, where she made a very good cut, was the final person voted out. She has expressed, I think it was in her quarantine questionnaire with Dalton Ross, that she has been contacted multiple times to return,
Mhm.
has made the final round. I would imagine Blood versus Water would have been a perfect time to bring on Jenna Lewis. And for whatever reason, she has been cut at the last second. So this is certainly a category, Rob, one of the rarefied air of these Borneo cast members that is eager to come back.
I believe Jenna Lewis even was, I think that there was a tweet that I was on. I don't remember what the tweet was. And she responded that she definitely would play for Survivor 50. And I think that Jenna Lewis, she's always like a lot of energy, as anybody from Survivor Borneo could tell you. I mean, I think that she seems like that she is still in fighting shape to be able to go back and play. From a story perspective, I don't know necessarily if like following Survivor All Stars that it's like, okay, does Jenna Lewis have unfinished business with Survivor? But I just think that any of these people, even if there's like, it seems unlikely, just to have the story of that somebody from the very first season comes back to play. I really think that they will try very hard to get, and if not somebody from Borneo, somebody from Australia. I think they really want to have at least a face from this. And so Jenna Lewis was a very young person when she played
Yeah.
on Survivor Borneo. So Jenna Lewis at that time was but 22 years old. So she'd only
Wow.
be 46 now. So, I mean, I think that she would be, you know, a good candidate to potentially come back and return.
Yeah, and I mean, she has kind of experienced, both sides of the edit. She was, of course, part of this underdog tribe in
Mhm.
Survivor Borneo. I would say perceived a bit as a villain in Survivor All Stars, considering that she was the one that was edited to be most vocal about basically let's get rid of all the winners and all the big faces so that we could get to the end. And so I agree. I'm not sure what a Jenna 3.0 would look like, but I do love the appeal of bringing her back because I do think, as All Stars Baby showed, she is someone that would be willing to get her hands dirty in a more modern Survivor environment.
She dug the latrine, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. And the log cabin as well.
Mhm.
And anything about Jervis, we've seen for a second time, made to the final three.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I'm gonna let sleeping coconuts lie on
Oh,
Jervis.
interesting. Because I feel like that coming into this, I feel like that Jervis is one of the people that I think could be most likely to return from Survivor Borneo because that Jervis, he was 30 at the time of the original Survivor. So he's 54 now. But if you run into Jervis, that I'm sure Jervis still looks great. I'm
Mm.
sure that he is still going to be able to compete in the challenges. We got to see a little bit of like his trash talking side, especially if they do some kind of a format of the new versus old school versus new school, of
Mm.
the old era versus the new era. Like if you really were looking for that person that is going to talk trash at the new era about how their Survivor is so easy and back in our day we had it tough, like Jervis could definitely be that guy. And so I think that Jervis, I think, would definitely be somebody who I think has, as much of a shot as almost anybody else from Survivor Borneo to come back.
I think the question is he looked upon by his most recent performance, which is really as a GOAT, right? Where like he did have moments of popping off, don't let that fool you, brought some personality, but for the most part, he was really regarded as just like Tyson's sidekick, who was
Yeah,
just kind of there.
but look, Jervis did not really know how to play the game in Survivor Borneo. Okay. Now he comes in, learns the game, watches, one of the greats in Tyson. Like, does Jervis have it in him now?
Ah,
3.0?
that could, yeah. Did he read the TA rules and decided to come back and perhaps find a TA as he becomes the teacher?
Yeah. So I do think that it would be nice to have somebody from the first season. I think there's only a couple of viable people that could come back. I think Jervis would love to come back and get another shot at it. So I think that it is a possibility. I'd be in favor of putting him on a vote.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly staying active with members of the community. I see him trash talking other people's sports teams all the time.
Mhm.
Let's finish up one more jury member here. Go back to the enigmas here. Dr. Sean Caniff, of
Yeah.
course, the
Sean
pioneer of the infamous alphabet strategy.
Sean Caniff, I think, would also be somebody who's very interesting to potentially
Mm,
return. I think if you were going to bring back somebody from Survivor Borneo, I think that he's somebody that people remember. The alphabet strategy is definitely a thing. He was also 30 at the time of Survivor Borneo, so 54 years old, definitely is able to come back out there and play. Is he super interested in coming back to play? That I couldn't tell you. He doesn't seem to be particularly interested in Survivor based off of what I see him posting on social media. But I think he could, like, again, are people clamoring for Dr. Sean? I don't know. But I think that he would be an interesting case.
Dr. Sean was kind of like the original meme contestant, I feel like. Like the
Mhm.
alphabet strategy was so ridiculous. The interesting thing is that I think if you look further into, and maybe this is another podcast for another day, is like, is the alphabet strategy as bad as people think? I think you guys talked about this on TEOS, argued
Yes.
about it a bit of
Yes.
like, did Sean really adopt more so this strategy of like, I don't want to be seen as a bad person by the public because I want to be famous. And so I'm
Yeah.
going to come up with like this out to vote out contestants.
That was my theory. Josh and I talked about it a lot in TEOS, and Dr. Sean, I got the chance to interview him a
Yeah.
couple years after that, and he said, no, I really just was doing the alphabet thing. But he's not, is he going to admit it now?
No, of course not. He still wants to be viewed in the eyes of people. I think it'd be a very fun person to bring on.
My argument was he's a brain surgeon.
Yeah,
Like, he can't figure out the votes.
I mean, weren't you there with a rocket scientist who couldn't solve a code in the
Dang,
first
right.
Immunity Challenge? Also, I think Jeff, I'm so excited for Dr. Sean to say, like, screw the fishing gear, Jeff. We have Super Bowl 2025. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah.
All right.
So
So this is obviously the brunt of our conversation, but let's bat a little cleanup here. Let's just talk about our first 7 pre-jurors.
well, I'd love to just
sure.
take a moment and just say,
Of course.
Rudy, what a great, got to play with him in
Yeah.
Survivor All Stars. And so Rudy, you know, he wouldn't like
He would, yeah. I mean, I think he would be what, like nearly 100 by the time that this would come around.
So yeah, Rudy, wow. He was 72 then, so he would be 96 years young
Yeah.
if he made it to this.
And you know what? I still think he'd be like, yeah, we don't need no Flint. It's fine.
You know, they call it the new era, but I think the old era was fine.
I don't even know what TikTok is. I know clocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let's clock some pre-jurors here. I guess, should we stay on the in memoriam train here? Because this is,
Sure.
you know, the most recent Survivor death is, of course, the loss of Sonia Christopher a few weeks ago. I know, Rob, you and Josh got the opportunity to memorialize her and replay his First One Out interview with her. Very sad loss for the Survivor community.
Yep, very sad about Sonia. You know, would have been nice to at least check in with her for the 50th anniversary season, if not for her to play. I mean, for a podcast. But we never, in all of the excitement around the finale, we never checked in with Liz Wilcox and got the story about how she became so close with Sonia.
Yeah, I think what she had
Did they go
said
to Applebee's together?
I have no idea. I mean, I think what she said at the time was that Sonia was doing a buff giveaway contest. And Liz, like from a fan perspective, I think had signed up and won. And part of that was, I guess, some sort of call with Sonia. And then they built some sort of friendship from there.
Okay. Like maybe that's what's happening with Q on Cameo these days.
We could only hope so. And then also we have lost as well the second boot from Survivor history, BB, to so we're only left with
Am I imagining that anecdotally that BB did want to play again?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, that's the thing, is I would imagine BB may have deluded himself into believing, like, no, I just needed the right people who wouldn't balk at the idea of me washing my clothes.
I got it all figured out. I'm trying to remember if I am making that up.
He did offer an alliance to Ramona as they were looking for the water well in the Survivor premiere, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the other people that are up for grabs here are, well, maybe not up for grabs with the person we start with. It's Stacey Stillman.
Stacey Stillman, of the living contestants, maybe the least likeliest person to appear back on Survivor.
What if they gave her like 4 idols to start the game? Like, no, don't worry, it's in your favor now.
No, I mean, you think that she doesn't want to come back? I think it's much more a case of I think that she's probably not welcome in the Survivor camp on Fiji.
Yeah, I think if anything, she'd have to go by, like, I don't know, Macy Millman.
Yep. And for the uninitiated, you could go back and look that up. There was a court case after the first season of Survivor that Stacey Stillman said that the Survivor was unfair and that Mark Burnett had pressured. Was it that Stacey Stillman?
Dirk and Sean, I believe. Yeah, I think it was that originally Rudy was going to be voted out, but allegedly during their confessionals, production had poked Dirk and Sean in particular to change their votes to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So
beyond that,
Dirk testified, I think, also at that trial.
I was going to say, so we could talk about someone who was in that deposition in Dirk Bean New, as Liana would say, Ramona Gray, who I know showed up on some of those Survivor diversity panels that did happen a few years ago. And then our 2 pagongs that really began the streak to end this tribe in Joel and Gretchen.
Okay, so if we could talk about them I'll talk about them in reverse order of
Mm,
likelihood, starting with Joel. I think that Joel, certainly Mr. January. I feel like that, it's right there, Bryce, if you ever
I know.
wanted
Come
it.
on.
Okay. I think that would be probably unlikely. I think for Joel, who was, one of the, standouts, could have gone further in Survivor Borneo. He's 27 in Borneo, so that makes him 51 now. So not sure necessarily he's going to be high on the list, even if they want somebody from Borneo. Now, Ramona is interesting
Ramona is
to
interesting.
me because Ramona has, stayed in these circles, Mike.
Yeah.
And Ramona, as you mentioned, was part of the group that really pressured Survivor to adopt the diversity initiative for all of the reality shows. Ramona's a scientist. Ramona, too, also looks. I'm not trying to objectify Ramona. Ramona is in fighting shape.
Mm. I mean, Ramona, additionally, this is a bit of apples and oranges, but I believe she competed in Battle of the Bush, which was a South Africa fan event a few years back, where
Oh,
I think Bryce and Wendell were a part of it as well,
yes.
where
And she won
previous
the weakest link.
Well, that certainly is something that you could bring home, especially in the year 2000. But Ramona is somebody. Now, what's interesting is in the quarantine questionnaire, she kind of had implied that Battle of the Bush was kind of like her way of fulfilling her unfinished
Oh.
business, where she's like, I wanted to know what would happen if I made the merge. I made it to like sixth place. I won individual immunity. I feel good. Now, that being said, I'm sure she could be roused to come back if she would. But I think the question is, in our circles, maybe her spot has popped. I'm not sure on Survivor where really she was known as the one who was always sick until she was voted out.
Mhm. I do think there is a possibility for Gretchen.
I think there's a very high possibility for Gretchen.
High
So,
possibility.
I
Okay.
mean, from our perspective at least, in terms of something I would like to see, because Gretchen Cordy was a victim of the most chaotic vote in Survivor history. Of course, 4 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to
Mhm.
1, where basically the Toggy Four pluralized the votes while everyone else was so scattered and voted off Gretchen. We had the infamous "It's me" moment before Taylor Swift did it 20 something years later, as she realized that the votes were coming in for her. Ironically enough, I remember when we did the B&B in its original days and we asked
Yeah.
people, like, what's the first episode of Survivor people usually watched? It was the merge of Survivor Borneo. And one of the reasons why Gretchen went is I think a lot of people saw her as someone who could be a viable candidate to win from Pagong.
Yep. Now, Gretchen, at the time, she was 38 years old. So Gretchen, at this point, would be 62 years young to go and play Survivor. Uh, Survivor, I think, really prides itself on, okay, physical challenges. Also, I mean, that Gretchen was a great survivalist way
Yes.
back when.
50% she was a
I believe
nature
she,
guide, right?
yeah, yes. She's listed as a teacher. I feel like that
Okay.
she works in radio now, from what
Ooh,
I
oh,
remember.
she'd be great confessionalist then.
Yes. But I don't know. I think it's a little bit of like it would not be the wildest thing to ever
Mhm.
happen, but I feel like that out of like the people that we've talked about, I think that there could have been a time and a place to bring back Gretchen, but to bring back 62-year-old Gretchen from the first season to play, and Survivor 50, they're going to amp up the challenges. These are going to be like the challenge department is going to be going out of their mind. So I think that probably, while possible, I think one of the more less likely possibilities.
I mean, I think where she would be the most viable would be a second chances setting, right? Because much like Greg, I think Gretchen is sort of in that category of it was the first season. Nobody really knew what they were doing, even though Gretchen sort of had the idea of an alliance as well on Pagong. It's just that nobody would bite and was voted out by a next level piece of strategy from this show. So I would love to see it kind of get paid forward as well of like, now how would she do in this hyper strategic environment? Uh,
Mhm.
Anything on Dirk, Rob?
No.
Great. Let's move ahead. So here we go. We talked about the entire cast, and look, this will go a little bit over 50 minutes, just because we have to do a lot of set dressing at the top here. But
Look, that's the goal, Mike. Doesn't mean that we're gonna hit it every time. We're here to make a good podcast.
well, here's where it comes down to the heart of the matter, Rob. It is now our job to figure out 1 to 3 candidates that we would like to put forward on this fan vote ballot.
Well, how do we decide? Do we each write down 3 names?
I think it could
and
be
then,
something.
And then the matches get through?
I think we could do that, or we could also do, like, if one of us has a candidate and the other
Richard
one
knows
doesn't,
how to get matches through, by the way.
Yes, exactly. So I think, we could certainly write down maybe our own top 3 and then try to see what matches up. And then if there's any separate components that you really want to argue for, I'm more than happy to meet you there.
No, I think I have a top 3 that combines viability and also desire from production. Is that the right word? Interest.
What do you got going on?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say, I think probably most interesting that I'm gonna say I'll go Greg.
I had Greg on my list as well.
I don't know if he would do it. I think that they would want him. I don't know if he would do it. Maybe they could talk him into it. And I think that could be a thing where people might tune in. Oh, Greg from the first season is on. Oh, okay.
I think all they need to do is he walks in and say, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 1 million. Match it.
Yeah. And if they can't get him for this, somebody's got to then do the documentary series to find him.
All right. Well,
somebody's got to do that.
Yeah, we're waiting for the Kickstarter to start as to finding Greg Buis.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll throw out one here. I will throw out Jenna Lewis.
Okay, Jenna also on my list.
Okay, there we go. 2 for 2 right now. Again, I think that she is someone that has a lot of interesting capabilities that I think would show, and also helped by the fact that she has been in the running apparently plenty of times and is more than happy to come back.
I think that Jenna Lewis, look, if they were looking for somebody from these first couple of seasons, that I think that Jenna Lewis is somebody who's not going to be past the limit where they're like, okay, this person can't play Survivor anymore. So she's always been very physically fit, even more so. I think that as time has gone on, and I used to, know Jenna Lewis particularly well. I had a very bad faux pas with her way back when, around the time that we were casting for Survivor All-Stars. And
well, you were part of the infamous group 2 Ambers and 2 Robs, right?
2 Ambers and 2 Robs. And that summer, there was a lot of interactions between all the survivors. And one night, Jenna Lewis was talking to me, and she said, "So, what do you think? What do you think about my chances?" And I said, Jenna, I got to be honest. I'm like, I got to think.
Don't start with that. Do not start with that, Rob.
I think you're on the outside looking in. I don't really think that, I think there's a lot of other. And she was like, yeah, well, like, I'm going. Like, oh, I feel so stupid now. She never got a chance to even vote me out, though. Ha ha ha. Joke's on you.
So let's have it finally be paid forward for Rob to be wrong and for Jenna to get put on this list.
Put her on. Right. Put her on our list. Okay. And then the other person that I have, I don't know if you're going to turn your key, Mike, but I'm going to have Jervis also on as one of the people that I think could potentially return.
So I think right now it's going to come down to a battle of the G's. I think it's either Jervis or Gretchen for that last spot.
Yeah. I think that Jervis has way more name recognition, and that if you're looking for somebody from the first season, I feel like that, the diehards of diehards, I think, are going to remember Gretchen, whereas I feel like that Jervis, not that Gretchen is that common of a name, but it's such a unique name. Like, he's done a good job of keeping his name out there. I know he's already come back for Blood versus Water, but if you wanted somebody to say, like, okay, and all the way back from the very first season, like, I just think that Jervis, coming out there and like, giving that, buff tip he would talk a lot of trash. Like, I think there's a lot there with Jervis. And I think that Jervis, I know we interviewed him on Talking with T-Bird. I saw him the last time I was in Philly. He looked great. So I think that, Jervis could come back out there and, still be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I think what it comes down to, honestly, is perhaps viability, as you're speaking with, versus potential. Where I think for me, that's what
Hmm.
I see in Gretchen is this idea of someone who was kind of cut down in the prime of their survivor life, and yes, is would be being brought back under extremely different circumstances, but it's kind of one of those bigger what ifs, one of those bigger Rob's.G. Odysseys in the first couple of seasons of Survivor, and so it is a bit more of a heart pick for me, but I do think if we're also trying to look at this as an opportunity to maybe bring back some of those people who haven't had that chance and could be sort of that X factor in addition to Greg and Jenna, that's why I would put Gretchen forward.
Why can't we put both in? Why can't we have four? You
Are
made
we,
up these rules. Well, why can't we do like? Aren't they made to be broken? Don't we want to give people options?
I mean, I'm happy to put forward four. I'm happy to break these rules immediately.
Mhm.
Sam is saying
Who cares? Who cares if we put in 3 people or 4 people from Survivor Borneo?
it is Survivor Borneo. I think we can make an exception for
Why are we
Survivor Borneo.
boxing ourselves in of like, oh no, we can only put 3 people per season on the list? Like, it's a fan vote.
I mean,
I understand why we're getting it down from 16 to a smaller number, but who cares if it's 3 or 4?
I'm going to be put on my dad hat right now and be like, I will allow it this once, but next time I will be more strict. I'll be Jeff with the negotiations, right? Of like, you denied me once, but
No,
I'll come back
I
even
don't
harder.
know why we're being so ticky-tack. Like, this isn't real.
Tell that to all the people that are going to be in the comments demanding that we put Sue on the ballot.
That Sue Hawk, I do not believe would want to come back for this. Like, if there was if we were like debating between 4 viable people, I think it's fine. I think the goal should be to try to get it to 3. But if it's like, okay, we have to leave somebody off the ballot, like why? Like, ultimately, everybody's going to get a chance to vote on this. Like, why are we spiting Gretchen or Jervis?
All right, well, listen, I'm here to stick with the G's, and that's what we're doing with the list that we're putting forward right now. So our first names on this ballot for a possible season 50 fan vote will be in order of finish, reverse order: Jervis Peterson, Jenna Lewis, Greg Buis, Gretchen Cordy. Real Pagong representation here on the ballot.
Yes. Okay. And I think we did a good job.
I like it personally. Again, I think to your point, people will have their quibbles. I think in a perfect world, someone like Sue would be viable to come back. But I think we are also trying to live relatively in the realm of, okay, realistically, would they want to come back? And as much of a mystery as it might be for some of these people, at least with these people, we have definitive answers, usually one way or the other.
Yeah. And I don't mean to disparage Gretchen at all. I mean, my biggest thing is I'm not sure if Gretchen at 62, and maybe somebody will say, Rob, she just ran an ultra marathon yesterday. Certainly possible. I don't know. But I just feel like that in Survivor's, current casting, and it's gonna be an older cast anyway. Like, I don't know necessarily if we're gonna go with what they're looking for.
Last thing that I want to do is, of course, the ability to appear on reality TV is not limited to Survivor. And especially in the past couple of years, we have seen a slew of these all-star reality shows outside of Survivor. Things like The Challenge, things like The Traitors, things like The GOAT, and other shows that don't just begin with the. So I want to, at the end of all these podcasts, also put in a superlative for one wild card pick. Rob, if we could pick one member of this Borneo cast who's not on our current ballot that you would want to see on another type of these shows, what would it be? I have one in mind, so I'll just say it at the top while you're thinking. Because while Sue Hawk may not want to get on a beach anytime, I would love to see her in a mansion. I would love to see her on The Traitors.
Yeah, I just think that she's done with the spotlight. I mean, I feel like that Richard certainly could do The Traitors. I think that's definitely in the realm of possibility. I think him mixing it up with Alan Cumming, I think would definitely be something memorable.
Yeah, and Richard does have a history with Cumming, considering all the children he sired.
Yes, okay. And I also feel like, has Richard Hatch not done The Masked Singer yet? Has that not happened?
We haven't had anybody from a CBS reality show on The Masked Singer yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those would be, the people that I think that
what would he be? He's most well known for not wearing a costume.
I guess so. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to know.
We could only imagine. So yeah, that's a little bit more of a
Stingray.
loosey-goosey, like what we would want to see in other seasons. But Rob, One down, 30 something to go in this, and I am already very excited for these prospects. We've already broken our set rules, and where we've started to fill the ballot, and I am so pumped for what we're about to
Look,
get into.
it's great to have rules, but also like let's also, make sure to have fun too.
Exactly. Let's pull the Mike White method and ask ourselves,
Is it
is it
fun?
fun?
Yeah.
I certainly had fun. I hope you did as well, Rob.
I had a great time. This is so wonderful that this whole project. I'm very excited to see how it all goes, and I'll be listening every day.
Yeah, so again, we will be back every weekday. Now, we did put this out a little bit early. Typically, this would have dropped on Monday, June 3rd, but because, of course, the anniversary, hopefully, like Jeff Probst, we will not pass that anniversary opportunity up. So the next one you'll be listening to is, of course, the Australian Outback. That's going to come out on Tuesday, the 4th. So you have a little bit of the weekend and change to kind of mold things over, but I will be back discussing the 16 contestants of Survivor the Australian Outback. And look, we are talking about people who have not been linked up with Survivor for some time that are looking for a return. I could think it no more appropriate that we go from Richard Hatch to down the hatch as Josh Wigler will be talking
Wow.
Survivor. He's going to be sitting down with me to talk about who
Tyler
from.
Weigert?
Yes, exactly. To figure out who from Survivor, the Australian Outback, should be entered in this ballot alongside our four pagongs. Rob, anything else you'd like to plug right now for the listeners? I know we're already kind of a bit long on time.
No, if you just happen to check this out, be sure to check out our Summer of Survivor Wednesday nights. Mike and Shannon and I are figuring out a new Survivor podcast to do every single week with the help of you, the listeners. So be sure to join us for that. That's all here in our Survivor podcast feed at robisatwebsite.com/Survivor feed.
And of course, again, make sure you subscribe to check out everything we have going on. Again, every weekday we'll have one of these podcasts. Make your thoughts known as well. I'm sure you certainly have already, and let us know your thoughts about who you want to see on the ballot as we start building this thing up before the inevitable fan vote much, much, much later down the line. This has been such a great opportunity. I'm so excited for this project. I hope everyone else is as well. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
An honor to get to talk about some of this with an honest to goodness Survivor historian.
Well, if you're the honor, I am the Jervis, who is on the ballot. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back on Tuesday picking players from the Australian Outback with Josh Wigler. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.